Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's mission debrief for STEM in 30s Fly Girls Women in Aerospace. We'll be taking your questions live, so be sure to put them in the comments section. We'll get to as many as we can. Now, normally you would see a guest sitting next to me, but don't worry, we have an expert. Our expert today is Abigail Harrison, an aspiring astronaut, also known as Astronaut Abby. Abby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Abby, let's just get started. I've got a couple of questions for you. Who inspired you to get into, this astronaut Abby gig?
Well, it's kind of a complicated story. I've been interested in space ever since I was a little kid, probably 4 or 5 years old. It's my earliest memories are of standing outside and looking up at the night sky and just having all of these questions about space and wanting answers to them. Um, so I would say that there wasn't necessarily someone who off the bat inspired me to become interested in space, but along the way, there were many people who inspired and influenced me in being able to hold on to that passion and that dream and that interest. Namely, my mom, who has always been my biggest supporter and who was the one who actually helped me to set up my social media channels, which are what I now use to share my journey towards becoming an astronaut with the world. Other than that, I had all kinds of incredible teachers, my fifth grade science teacher, Miss Hill, and then mentors within the industry as well, such as astronaut Luca Parmitano and Wendy Lawrence, who took me under their wing and were able to help guide me and give me the confidence that I needed as a young woman to continue to pursue such um, an I guess you would say narrow field, a very difficult to achieve dream and field.
Tell us about the Mars generation.
So the Mars Generation is a nonprofit that my mom and I founded about 4 years ago. And the goal of the Mars Generation is really to well, it has a couple goals. One of them is to educate the public about the importance of space exploration and STEM education, so science, tech, engineering, and math. But even more than that, our big goal is to provide resources right now to make sure that today's youth, today's young people, are being exposed to those fields and being exposed to space exploration. We want to make sure that a Mars generation as an idea exists in the future, a generation of people who are capable of actually landing humans on Mars. And the only way to make that possible is by making sure that you're doing the work now to expose, inspire, and then provide opportunities and resources for today's students to become tomorrow's leaders. We do that in a variety of ways. One of our big programs is that every year we offer 10 scholarships to students living at or below the national poverty line to go to space camp. We also, yeah, which is that's one of our big programs that's really close to my own heart. But we also do a lot of other work through social media and digital content to try and make sure we're reaching people around the world. Because when it comes down to it, the Mars generation is an idea. That's not just something that's here in the United States. It's not in any one state, any one country. It's a global idea.
Again, we want to remind everybody to submit your questions. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Abby, you are involved in some pretty exciting new projects. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with yourself these days?
Yeah, so I just recently graduated from college. I went to Wellesley College in Massachusetts for 4 years. And after graduating, I'm taking a gap year. So during that gap year, my very first stop was to go to Jackson, Wyoming. And in Jackson, Wyoming, I'm working for a nonprofit called Wyoming Stargazing, who has a very similar uh, mission as the Mars generation does of trying to expose the public to space exploration and to give them the opportunities to experience Wyoming's really dark, really beautiful night skies. And
Yeah.
so, as a part of that, I get to take people out into the national parks on stargazing tours. I get to use telescopes to show them things that are, tens of millions of light years away from our own Earth and try and introduce some perspective into people's lives. Um, After that, I will be headed back home to Minnesota for a couple months, where I'll be working on my. I just recently got a pilot's license a couple months ago as well, so I'll be working on the next step in that, which is to get an instrument rating to allow me to fly in bad weather. And then once I finish up in Minnesota, I've got a couple other things going on while I'm there, but that's the big one. Once I finish up there, once it gets warm enough, I'll be headed out to do a backpacking trip across Russia and China for a couple months.
Wow. Wow. You are busy.
It's a pretty packed gap year. I took full advantage of having that year out of school.
Well, it sounds like you've really filled it up.
I'm trying.
You want to be the first person to step on Mars. What steps have you taken to make this happen?
I do want to be the first astronaut to walk on Mars. And in order to make that a reality, one of the things that I've done that I think is so important is, and this is the advice that I always try and give to students who are interested in a similar career path, is that education has to come first. So the quality that you put in to your education, the amount of effort and engagement that you have is what really is going to distinguish you from other people when it comes time for astronaut selection, and then eventually the big selection of who's actually going on that first mission to Mars. So for me, the direction that took was going to a school that I really believed in, which was Wellesley College, which is a liberal arts, all women's college, graduating from there. And then along the way, I tried to do some extra things that I think will hopefully add to my resume to make me a well-rounded candidate who will be able to handle anything that's thrown at me while I'm on a Mars mission. So those things include a lot of scuba diving, some skydiving, flying airplanes, speaking multiple languages. So I've studied Russian and Mandarin Chinese, which I see both of those as being very important to the future of space exploration. And then the other one is that I think public speaking and being able to really communicate effectively with the public is another one that oftentimes gets overlooked when you're thinking about what it is that astronauts really do. But that's an incredibly important part of their job. And for most people, including myself, that's not the kind of thing that you just naturally are able to do. So that's something that I've put a lot of time and effort into over the years, trying to make sure that when, not if, but when I get selected as an astronaut, I'm able to fully share that with the constituents of not just the United States, but the world as a whole.
We have someone online who wants to know what your dog's name is.
So I live above my office, and that is our office dog that you're hearing barking downstairs. And he is just a little puppy. He's very cute. And his name is Monty, which is a little bit of a letdown from an organization that does stargazing, because I wanted to name him something out of a constellation.
Like,
but
serious?
We adopted him. Yeah, exactly. But we adopted him, and he already had a name, and it's very cute. So his name is Monty. But every now and then I call him Canis Minor until he gets bigger, and then we'll call him Canis Major.
How important is communication in what you're doing now?
Communication, I think that it's absolutely vital in every step of what I do right now. So there are a couple of facets of what I'm doing. One of them is that I'm running a nonprofit that's based largely on communicating to the public, and especially to the younger generation, in a way that they're receptive to. So trying to use social media and digital media, and trying to really make sure that this exposure to science, tech, engineering, math, and space is there for people who might not be exposed to it through more traditional means. So that's very important for what I do. It's also important for my, I would say daytime job, but it's actually a nighttime job, leading stargazing tours. And I feel like I was set up really well for this job by having had past communication experience. That really what I do is I get to go and I get to talk to people every day or every night about space, and I get to try and share my own passion with them. And then the third thing that I do that I'm not sure I mentioned is that I'm actually actively working on a research project with from the time that I spent down at the Kennedy Space Center Space Life Sciences Labs. I used to work in an astrobiology lab there. And right now I'm working on processing all the data that we collected and then writing a paper to publish about it. And at this point, the communication is not as vital for that as far as like communicating with the public. But once my paper is published, I hope to really make it something that is not as accessible, not just to people who speak academies, but also to anyone who's interested in what's currently going on in the search for extraterrestrial life.
We have someone who wants to know, as a potential Mars astronaut, what do you think of the group simulating a Mars colony here on Earth?
So there have been a couple over the years. There have been a couple different simulations of Mars here on Earth, and I think that what it comes down to, at least from my perspective and the people that I've talked to in this industry, is that the really important feature to simulate in those is isolation. The It's important for us to understand how humans are going to react under those extremely isolated and confined conditions. From just going, and we say just, but it's really still such a huge feat to go to the International Space Station. But because of the great difference between the two, I'll say different than just going to the International Space Station, where you're also in a very confined space for about 6 months with the same group of 6 people. That can be wearing and tearing on humans psychologically. We're social creatures. We're meant to have really diverse experiences and exposures to things in our lives, and we have a hard time when we don't. So that alone is difficult. But the added difficulty of going to Mars in that scenario is that you're taking away our connection to humanity as a whole. So astronauts on the International Space Station still have the ability to look out their window and to see Earth and to know that that's their planet, that's their home. And they have the ability to, in real time, talk to their families, to hear news, to send down their taxes, all of that kind of stuff. When we go to Mars, we're going to be losing all of those connections and ties. It's going to be very difficult for astronauts to feel bonded or connected to our home planet. And that adds another layer of psychological stress and difficulty to those missions. And so I think that when we're doing simulated Martian missions here on Earth, that's the thing that is really difficult to incorporate, but the most important one to try and add into those is just that level of disassociation from our history and our planet.
I want to remind everyone who's watching online to keep those questions coming. We still have some time to get through them. We had Anusha Ansari here a few months ago to help with the Women in Aerospace program, and she came back. She was very excited about visiting the X Prize Spaceship One. And now I know you've been to the museum. What is your favorite thing when you visit here? What's the thing you have to see?
I'm trying to think. Well, first off, I have to say that I love Anusha Ansari. She is such an incredible heroine. I read her book like 5 times when I was younger, and she is someone that just every young woman and young man and older women and older men can look up to, and really, like, I would highly recommend reading her book and checking her out. But as far as what I like to see when I come visit, why do you put me on the spot with questions like that? I can't choose. I want to see it all. I want to see everything. I think
and you're flying airplanes now, so it's both things.
Like,
it's yeah.
Exactly. And that makes it even more difficult. And here's the thing: is that I think you know this, but some of the viewers might not know that my journey as a social media influencer and advocate for STEM and for space actually really started with the Smithsonian, because I set up a Twitter account when I was 13 years old with the help of my mom. Always get parental supervision if you're underage. Not to sound like a total nerd there, but because I was in a after school program called History Day, where I was working on a project called for the International Space Station. And the prize, if you won State History Day, was that you got to go to DC and compete at the national level there. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, sure, competing at the national level would be cool. But what I really want to do is I want to win this so that I can go to the Smithsonian. And so, and it's that Twitter account that I set up to help find some primary sources and talk to people in the industry to bolster my project and to really make sure that it was accurate and well-rounded, that grew into what's now 1 million followers across my social media platforms, where I have this chance and this opportunity and this ability to be a voice for my generation and our love and interest for STEM. But all of that grew from wanting to come visit you guys. And so it's hard for me to say what's my favorite thing to come see, because since the beginning, I've wanted to see all of it. Thankfully, I've gotten to now. I get to come visit you guys plenty. It's great.
Yeah, you've been a couple of times and you've been on the show, and we've enjoyed having you. Why do you think it's important, particularly for young girls, to get involved in STEM education?
So, how much time do we have left? Because I could go on about that one. So, I mean, there are really a couple of reasons that I find it important. And one of them stems back to when I was growing up, my mom, who is not at all in the STEM fields, that's not what her job is in. When I was growing up, she was actually a social studies teacher for high school. But she stressed to me and my sister, she stressed our entire lives growing up to not turn off math. That no matter what else we were interested in, no matter where we thought that our careers were going to take us, or what was going to be important in our lives, that one thing that we could always count on to be important in some way was to have a strong foundation and background in math. And I think that that's really true, because it really doesn't matter what field you end up going into, you're going to need to have the skills of math in order to be successful in your personal life, in your professional life, in everything. And I think that that stretches even further into STEM fields, because STEM fields, it's not just about knowing what Newton's laws are, or being able to, recite digits of pi or something like that. It's about learning how to think, and about learning how to look at the world critically, and to ask questions, to be curious, and then to know how to go about answering those questions. And I think that that's what STEM teaches. And that's what we need to be continuing to encourage people to take an interest in, and to have a strong foundation in, to understand how things around them work. And I think it's especially important for young girls, because it's really easy. We've made a lot of progress as far as gender equality in STEM fields goes, but we haven't made enough progress yet, because there are still these stereotypes that start to hit, especially when girls are in their preteens, where it's really easy for them to, because of a variety of reasons, but largely because of societal pressures and such, to stop taking an interest in that. And that's the age where they're just starting to really build upon those foundations that they've gotten in STEM, in science and math and all of those fields. And so it's especially important for girls to continue down that path, to continue to get more exposure and more capability in STEM fields, so that they can set themselves up for success, however that looks to them in their future.
So Heather wants to know, 20 years from now, we have colonized Mars. What is the bigger picture for space exploration?
I like your optimism, Heather. The one caveat that I have to point out with that question is that colonizing Mars is a really, really big undertaking, and it's not something that we're going to be doing in 20 years. From a realistic point of view, that's quite a bit farther in our future. We have to get people to Mars first. Voting for me on that one. We have to get people there. We have to get people back. We have to learn how to support people on Mars and how to really have Earth independency. So the difference between the types of space exploration, human space exploration we've done in the past and are currently doing is that so far everything has been so close to Earth, whether it's low Earth orbit with the International Space Station or going to the moon, which is only about 3 days. It's all close enough that you can get assistance from Earth, whether that's in the form of material assistance, so having things sent to you in the case of an emergency, or as we saw with Apollo 13, it might be in the form of information. So that's an equally important thing that Earth can offer to spacefarers is information. So the ability to call back to Earth and say, hey, we have someone who needs this surgery, but we don't have someone on board who knows how to do that surgery. You could then have a surgeon on Earth help to talk someone through the correct procedures, the correct life-saving methods. That's a medical example. You could have the same thing for engineering, like they did on the Apollo mission. Any of those issues, you have experts on Earth who are able to provide their expertise, their knowledge, their insight to people. When we go to Mars, the difference is that we're going to have to develop Earth independency. So not only can we not expect physical items and help to come from Earth in a timely manner, we also can't expect to get instantaneous communication and information. People on Mars are really going to have to be self-sufficient because of the huge time lag in communications. And so that means that's a whole new can of worms essentially that we're opening up when we start to think about Mars exploration. But that's exactly what makes Mars exploration so important. And I think this is where it ties back into Heather's question, which is that even if we're not colonizing in 20 years on Mars, exploring Mars, having humans on the surface of Mars, having them start to learn these tools and techniques for Earth independent space travel is what's going to open the rest of our solar system and eventually the rest of our universe to human exploration. Because if we can learn how to do it on Mars, then we've developed the skills, the tools, the technologies that we need to go even further than Mars. Mars is both a huge hurdle that we have right now to overcome and also a playground. It's a box of sand that we get to play in to learn how to explore the rest of the universe.
Carol would like to know, how soon do you believe a human will step onto Martian regolith? And you might want to define what regolith is.
That's a very good point to make. So regolith it's essentially soil without organic material in it. So here on Earth, you have soil, dirt on the ground, and even though it looks like it's totally abiotic, non-living, there's all kinds of stuff in that soil. There's organic matter, there's actual living organisms, so microorganisms. Soil's really, really cool. You can dig up soil and find just like incredible communities of bacteria and viruses and all kinds of other small organisms. Regolith is pretty much a sterilized version of that. It's dirt without any of the life in it. And that's what you find on the surface of Mars is regolith. That's what you find on the surface of the moon is regolith. Earth is really the only place that so far we know that true soil exists. Everywhere else it's regolith. So remind me, what was the question?
The question is, when do you think the first human will step foot on the Martian regolith?
Yep. Okay, so that's a hard one because I'm not a fortune teller, so it can be difficult to make any of those claims with any certainty is the warning that I'll put on that. But from my personal beliefs on this is that it's happening soon. It's going to happen within the next couple of decades. And I would say on the earlier side of that. So I'd say we're looking at maybe 15 years from now, we could have humans on the surface of Mars. But definitely sometime between 10 and 30 years is the wider range that I would give. It truly does make us the Mars generation.
Well, Jenny noted that you run a telescope program in the evening, and she would like to know what kind of telescope should a beginner get?
Ah, that's a good question. Um, it's difficult because there are a lot of factors in there, such as where you live. That can make a
Hmm.
really big difference because if you live in a city or near a large city, and that's where you plan to mostly use your telescope,
Like I do.
then yeah, like you do, like I did for most of my life. I didn't actually see the Milky Way until I was 18 years old.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was crazy. And actually, I went out to Siberia, and that's the first time I saw like a true sky of Milky Way. Um, but a lot of us can find dark skies with Milky Ways without going halfway across the world. Just a couple hours outside of cities will usually do it. But if you're planning to mostly use your telescope inside of a city, then you can definitely look at some of like the lower quality, smaller, mirror sized ones because what you're going to be using it for is looking at the planets and looking at the moons or looking at the moon. Um, Things that are within our own solar system, you can see whether or not you're in a city or in a dark sky area. If, however, you do plan to take your telescope and go somewhere without light pollution or to go somewhere with high elevation, dry air, all of these things that make for better stargazing, then you might want to invest in a little bit of a higher end type of telescope. My personal recommendation as far as telescopes go is Celestrons. That's the brand that I really like. Celestrons are great. They're really easy for beginners to use. They come in a lot of different price points and a lot of different mirror sizes. So mirror size is how we talk about like the ability of the telescope to see things. It's magnification basically. Um, Other than Celestrons, another really great one, this isn't a brand, but it is a type of telescope that you could look for, is a small Dobsonian telescope. So those are my two recommendations for beginners are to look at some of the lower price point Celestrons and then also to look around online for, maybe a 10-inch Dobsonian or something like that.
And you and I talked before the program that you can use binoculars too. There's plenty you can see with binoculars.
Absolutely. Yep. So binoculars are great. You can see all kinds of things with binoculars. Not only can you see some of the stuff in our solar system, such as planets and our moon, but you can also see things that are as far away as other galaxies. So galaxies like the Andromeda Galaxy, you'll be
What?
able to see through binoculars. Some things like the Perseid Open Cluster, you'll be able to see through binoculars. And you can find lists and lists of stuff online that will tell you all of the things that you'll be able to see through binoculars or through a certain size of telescope during a certain time of the year. There's a huge, really great community of people who are stargazing enthusiasts to have put all of that information out online. Yeah.
And we have a question from Sadie. She wants to know, has your path changed and what kinds of obstacles have you had to overcome?
Absolutely. um, so all kinds of things have changed in my path, which was definitely a surprise to me because I put together my first 20-year plan when I was 11 years old. I wrote it all down. I presented it to my mom and said, here's what I'm doing with my life. Here are all the steps I'm going to take. I'm not going to deviate 1 inch from this. Like, here's how I'm accomplishing my goal. And by the time that I was like 16, I had already, instead of going down this path, I'd already gotten woo. And then by the time that I've reached the age I am now, I'm 22, it's like that original plan that I created is still the backbone. It's still the basis for what I'm doing. But there have been so many things where either I've diverged from that plan or things have been added. Things that I didn't even know were going to be important or were going to be options or opportunities for me have been added. Things like becoming a pilot. That was
Right.
something that when I was 11 years old, both from a perspective of not knowing anyone who was a pilot, I didn't realize that you could be a pilot without being a commercial pilot. Also, from not having necessarily the financial means to go about getting a pilot's license, not knowing that there are a lot of opportunities for young women to get scholarships to fly, all of those types of things, piloting was not on my radar at all. And here I am 10 years later with a pilot's license. And so that's one of the things that definitely got added into my plan that I didn't imagine in any way beforehand. Other examples include what I majored in college. I went into college thinking that I was going to do a double major in astrophysics and Chinese culture. And it turns out that what I ended up majoring in was biology and Russian with a strong lean in my biology towards astrobiology. And so that was a pretty big flip to have made, but it's the same kind of flip that pretty much every college student out there will be able to tell you that if they thought they knew what they were going into at the beginning, by the time you leave after 4 years, it's completely different. And those kinds of changes, both additions, subtractions from your plan, and then also just alterations of what was already there, are really, really normal, because we have no idea what life is going to throw at us. And a lot of my best opportunities and best experiences have come from not being rigid with that, from having learned to kind of try things out, take them as they go. Yeah.
We have another question from Charles, who wants to know, would you volunteer for a mission to Mars?
I would. So, I mean, there are circumstances under which I would volunteer for a mission to Mars. One of the big ones is that I am very, very strongly in favor of a two-way mission to Mars. I love Mars, but I love Earth more. I'll just say it. I'm not afraid to put that out there. But really, the reason that I don't support one-way missions to Mars, and that I wouldn't personally volunteer for one, is because I think that when we go to Mars, it has to be done in a way that is responsible and ethical, that protects the future of space exploration, not just what we're doing now. You have to take it and look at it with a long-term perspective, which is that if we send humans to Mars on a one-way trip right now, the truth of the matter is that we don't have the technological ability to sustain a reasonable lifespan on the surface of Mars. So it would really become a suicide mission where we're sending people there to die. And that is both ethically wrong, and it's also the most surefire way to lose public support for space exploration.
Sure.
There's nothing that people hate more, and that really leaves a long-lasting bitter feeling and taste in the mouths of the public than to allow astronauts to die in space. And so to allow that to happen on purpose is unconscionable. And I absolutely don't support that. I think that that would make it really difficult for us to continue to have space exploration, and especially Mars-focused human space exploration in the future. So we have to do it responsibly. We have to sometimes maybe put the brakes on in order to make sure that when we do go to Mars, we're doing it the right way. So that said, I wouldn't volunteer for that kind of mission. And even when it comes down to it, though, it's not going to be a volunteer opportunity, is the truth of the matter for missions to Mars. It's going to be a highly selected process where NASA and partnering agencies, whether those are private agencies or multi-country like groupings, they're going to go ahead and they're going to select people for this because they are the cream of the crop. They're the best of the best. They're the people who have the best chance of making these missions a success. So it's not quite a volunteer opportunity, but
yeah,
if it were, I guess I would.
Okay, we are out of time. We want to end by what advice would you give to kids who want to follow in your footsteps?
My best advice for kids who want to follow in my footsteps, and especially for girls who are following down a STEM path or think they might be interested, is to be ready to fail. And
That's
that
good
sounds,
advice.
I know, right? When you say it, it sounds really stark. It sounds really mean. It sounds like I'm not being supportive. But the truth of the matter is that I think we have this tendency, I don't know if it's societal or cultural or what it is, to not talk about failures and to not talk about the fact that every path to success, every successful person, their path is littered with failure. It's absolutely strewn with times when they messed up, when the world messed up, when there was no mess up that happened, but things just didn't go their way. And that's just a part of the game, especially when you're reaching for a really big dream. Failure is going to happen. It's going to happen a lot, like more often than you'd want to think. And when we tell people, and when we tell kids especially, that failure is the end of the line, that it's the end of the road, then we're not setting them up for success, because we're not telling them that failure is not the end of the road. It's an important part of the journey. And it's something that you can actually learn a lot from failure. And that I think it's almost more important to fail than it is to succeed in a lot of instances. So I would say, yeah, be ready for failure. Go into it with the right mindset that there are going to be times where things don't go your way, and ask yourself, what is my backup plan, or how am I going to overcome that obstacle? What kind of support system do I have around me, or what kind of support system can I find? Can I search out to help me get over those instances of failure? And that's what's really going to allow young people and kids to continue down the type of path that I'm on, and hopefully someday to achieve really great things.
Abby, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to remind everybody to tune in next month when we will be talking about Apollo 12, second to none. Thanks for watching.
Thanks so much. And as a reminder, if anyone's interested in finding the nonprofit that I run, it is called The Mars Generation. You can find us at themarsgeneration.org, and also on all the social media channels as The Mars Generation. And me personally, you can find as Astronaut Abby on all of those same social medias. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Thanks, Abby.